Welcome to Nicola Romaine, who is the National Education Lead for Primary English at Twinkl. It's so nice to have a chat with you today. Well, we thought we would have a chat today because it's International Literacy Day, and with the work that you do at Twinkl in literacy and the work that we do Natterhub, it seemed like a really opportune moment to chat about the theme of the day, which is literacy in a digital age. And so thinking about International Literacy Day, what's your general feel about the situation of literacy, the profile of literacy in schools at the moment?
So I think that, it's really, really apt, I think, that we're talking about this International, Literacy Day, promoting literacy in this kind of digital era. And I think that we're very much on, I think it's really exciting, actually. If we get it right, I think it's really, really exciting. Obviously, there are some challenges there, but I think the opportunity around literacy with regards to digital is really, really great. There's an awful lot of research out there, which I'm sure we will talk about as we go through around reading and that kind of thing. I think that the challenges are, obviously, we have just had the DFE's writing framework that's been published in July. So schools are going to be going back now in September, and they're going to be thinking about writing. So they've been thinking about reading, haven't they, for a long time. So they've been thinking about the reading framework and all of those different aspects of reading, the technical side of reading, the word reading, and then, of course, the reading for pleasure, and what does that mean? I think there's still quite a way to go with regards to getting the balance right in schools around digital and print. And I'm super interested in that sort of space, if you like. And then, of course, as I said, they're going to be going back into schools now this September and addressing the writing framework. And I think there's a real opportunity, and I'm not even sure that this is the question you asked me, actually, but I think there's a real opportunity to leverage digital with regard, and that kind of online safety and everything with regards to writing and kind of leveraging writing and what it tells us in the writing framework, what it guides us to think about from a digital angle, as well as a more traditional angle as well. Both obviously are equally important today.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, with the balance, because obviously we are thinking about reading in a very distracted digital age, and our children live in a very distracted world with screens, fast-paced, dopamine-inducing images, and hyper-real images, and brains are wiring around this sort of overstimulation, whilst our children are then expected to go to a predominantly, if you like, analog space when they go to school, and then cope with being taught in a way that's perhaps not as initially as stimulating as that. And we're seeing how digital is often used as a pacifier for children even before they get to school, as a way to preoccupy their brains, to avoid the dreaded word that is boredom. And I think what we are seeing through the research is that neural networks for reading are rapidly sort of changing for toddlers, even right through to adulthood. So I guess what do you see as a really important entry point? Let's start right at the beginning of the primary age range in terms of preparing children for achieving in literacy in a digital era. What ideally would you say our schools need? Where do our schools need support in those early years?
I think it's that. I think you're right in that kind of analog and digital, and that conflict really that is happening, around that kind of what's happening in schools. And I think that, I know we've spoken before about reading aloud and audio, and I think that's when it comes to reading and vocabulary development, for example, which are really, really obviously, that we know that by listening to others read aloud, that children develop their vocabulary, particularly when, children's vocabulary isn't as strong, it's not as nourished, then listening to stories being read aloud is a really, really fundamental part of, you know, starting school when they can't read those books themselves because they're still learning to decode and read the words. Then the next sort of step really, or what should be happening alongside that, is that kind of nourishing them with that read aloud. And I think that, you know, audiobooks can really step into that space. I mean, I started teaching in 1998, for goodness sakes, and, you know, we had that kind of tape thing, you know, and children would be listening on a listening centre. But I think, you know, they're so good now, and there's so many audiobooks out there that I think that can really bridge school and home as well. And I think it's about, you know, there's a lot of work to be done, possibly, or a lot of potential around educating parents as well, or supporting parents to understand that audiobooks, listening to stories, is a really great way to kind of bridge that gap and make that digital space, I suppose, very meaningful in the home environment and something that happens in school as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that there was a fairly depressing statistic that came out through an article in The Guardian fairly recently, which was less than 50% of parents enjoy reading to their children. Now, we know that may be for a number of reasons, whether it's the, you know, parents' own literacy skills or access to books, and obviously people need more support and more access, and the profile of the library, and all of those things need to be raised, and funding is being removed at a time when we need it the most. But yes, I would agree that the being able to listen to stories, of course, is so important, because it's not just the academic side that's nourishing, as you said, and I love that use of the word nourishment, because of course listening to a story is all about developing those soft skills, understanding complexity, appreciating beauty, and positive role modeling, and supporting the idea of creating original thoughts, and also inviting very young children to form opinions and be able to use, you know, critical thinking skills. And I think once we unpack what all those additional skills, it's not just about decoding the words, as you've said, it's all that additional support in the social and emotional development of our children that is so critical that we don't lose that, because otherwise, you know, without that deep reading, without those skills being developed right in the early years, you know, we are really risking our children avoiding, you know, opportunities to develop those critical thinking skills. And without critical thinking skills, linking it back to, you know, digital, we are, you know, moving perhaps greater into shallow thinking, accepting misinformation. And obviously that's an area that we don't want to go in. Now, I know that you mentioned audiobooks, which it can be a brilliant resource. I would say that alongside, and I think sitting next to a child reading with a physical book is pretty hard to beat, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Give me a child and give me a book. I just want to give me a group of children and give me a book. I just want to do it now. Actually, grab a book from the shelves and,
I know, and actually, you know what. We would really encourage, I know that we have spoken about this before, we would really encourage children to, to maintain and hold dear that time in the day that is the story time, because it's so valuable. And I know that we are living in this fast-paced world, and it's easy to think, oh, there's a clip on YouTube, or there's a story on a tech platform that can replace that. But how do you feel about the print versus digital?
Okay, I feel quite strongly about the print versus digital, and I think it is a balance. I think I've said that earlier, but I think as long as we know what the research says, and as long as we know and understand broadly what the benefits of both of those two different types of reading, if you like, give us, and there's an awful lot of research, isn't there, around this, and I had some super interesting conversations actually with some people, you know, across the globe last year, and attended just kind of summit around this, and it's really, really interesting in the fact that, you know, that there are benefits to reading digitally that you know, around that kind of, particularly for children that struggle with reading. So obviously that accessibility is really, really important, and it levels the playing field. So I think that's a given, isn't it? That kind of being able to access something you wouldn't actually be able to access, you know, from a kind of like a social justice perspective, and that leveling the playing field is really, really important. We know that reading from print is better for comprehension, so that kind of deep engagement with text, you know, and being able to discuss, you know, you mentioned, you know, you can't be in the classroom, book children or book and child, and be able to kind of like, you know, have that conversation around that book is absolutely fantastic. But there are benefits, as I said, particularly children, you know, with specific needs or blockers and barriers to their reading that benefit, and it kind of escalates their learning. So I'm all in for that. If it, you know, anything that helps to bring children that wouldn't necessarily have those advantages, then I think that's really, really important. We mentioned parents, and that kind of, you know, again, going back to those barriers and blockers, and the fact that lots of parents, I think, you know, there is that time aspect, but don't have the confidence, I should say, to read to their children, maybe. You know, I think that is definitely an issue. You know, we've heard, you know, that you know, over the years, we've heard about parents that don't read with their children because of their own feelings around them, you know, themselves as readers, that kind of that stems from their own experiences in school. There's lots of different reasons there, aren't there? And there's lots of different reasons to support parents with reading stories to their children at home, and also leveraging the use of audio as well, as I mentioned earlier on.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that we are, you know, when we talk about living in a distracted age, it's not just children that are distracted. We as adults, we as parents, I know that we are both parents, so I say this without judgment, we are distracted ourselves. And so taking the mindful opportunity to sit and engage on a regular basis, you know, with a book, with reading, is just, it's so important. And we know that there's a link between children who are read to regularly from a young age and throughout primary school, and success and achievement in academic goals.
And sorry to interrupt you, Caroline. I was just going to jump in with, I had I think I can mention Martin Galway from the National Literacy Trust. I had a great conversation with him a couple of weeks ago, and about this very thing, about parents actually and reading, and actually parents, and we're kind of, I suppose, veering off topic a little bit, but, you know, that they shouldn't feel guilty, that they shouldn't beat themselves up around, you know, the whole reading to their children. There's lots of different ways, and one of the methods that he was discussing with me was that tell me method. So, you know, stemming from Aidan Chambers, you know, his tell me method. So I think this could be used with either print books or digital books. You know, it's about discussing the book with your child or with children after they've read, and it doesn't really matter where for this the story comes from, whether that comes from audio or whether it comes from a read story, you know, from a print book. It's about, and you've alluded to this earlier on, it's around, you know, tell me about how that makes you feel, or tell me more about what you think about that in that story. So you're really engaging, quite simple techniques really. But I'm really interested in how we can support parents and teachers to have those kind of really meaningful discussions around books, regardless of whether they stem from, as I said, a digital copy or a print copy. I think it's really important to be able to engage in that way.
Yeah, absolutely, because we know that they are the moments, the conversations, the times in class, the time spent with a parent that is going to lead to understanding, inference, empathy, analysis, all of that really good juicy stuff that needs to come out of
the really nourish
of reading. And again, you know, I know that schools are running very, very overcrowded timetables, but to raise the profile of that understanding about what children are reading, and the whole language development has got to be
paramount.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And the benefits, isn't it? I think, sorry, Carol. I think it's, I think going back to that kind of blended digital print research as well, which I would encourage anybody to kind of, if you're in education, if you're an educator, to really get under the skin of that research, and have a look at the balance and the benefits. So you're not actually beating yourself up either around, making those choices in your class. It's okay. And going back to, I would always pick up a book over a YouTube video. I would never kind of gravitate to that, first and foremost. But understanding those benefits, I think, are really, really important. And I think in general terms with literacy, it's about the research and the evidence, and understanding the why, the why that leads to the how. And trying out the how in your own setting, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And I think just to go back to the importance of talking to children about plot, the characters of whatever they're reading, or to engage with them, to increase the draw and the pull and the interest. Because often out of those conversations, if you're talking to a group of children, or you're talking to your own child about whatever they're into, even if it's something that we know that all of our children go through phases where they're really not interested in Pokemon or Warhammer, but actually if you've got some literary opportunity coming out of those, we need to be having those conversations. But I think through those conversations, children can be like, oh, I didn't realize that was that was a inferred message in the story, and therefore actually that makes more sense now. So it's not only is it supporting understanding, but I think it helps to overcome what we are seeing with this sort of cognitive impatience, because of the digital influence and overload. We've got this cognitive impatience, which means that the idea of reading a long, dense text is really requiring children to absolutely pull through. And we know that in those early stages of reading, it's all about overcoming cognitive impatience, whether it's phonics that you have a difficulty with, or because the language development isn't there to understand the vocab. And so having any opportunity to bring it to life is going to be helpful, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that cognitive thing, and they don't have to be long books, do they? And as a teacher, I've as much as I could spend all day actually in a classroom, immersing the children in a really long, text, particularly, upper primary, year 5 and 6, you can't beat, I don't think, getting under the skin of a really meaty text. But children have changed, cognitively, we've all changed, haven't we?
Yeah.
We're all absolutely glued to our phones and whatever. So I think it's okay as well to choose shorter text, up at the top of Key Stage 2 as well. That's okay, because what you don't want is not to be able to get to the end of that story, isn't it? And I think, as you say, that conversation, that dialogue, rich dialogue, the curiosity around texts is that all important thing. And kind of like, that critical thinking and evaluation, teaching children how to question and analyze, as you said, the purpose, audience, and that underlying message, and of course that then, and I'm linking back to digital and in a positive way, in a way here, but that skill is then applied, to the digital realm, I guess, of the ability to be able to scrutinize online media. Once they've got that ability to be able to question deeply, I suppose that kind of really supports them to be able to kind of identify misinformation and evaluate and that kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. And also that the importance of inclusion, where books will allow children to see themselves reflected. Books allow children to explore difference and understand that not everybody is on the same page. Books allow children to feel sort of less alone, in a sense, because they can identify identify with thoughts and inner thoughts and feelings of characters in stories. So
Yeah.
I guess how this connects to, what you were just saying about misinformation or aligning with influencers who perhaps don't necessarily have the same moral guidance that their families might prefer. So I think it's really, really crucial that we do everything we can to support schools in promoting this.
And definitely, coming back to that kind of being, thinking critically, and it links back to oracy as well, doesn't it? And the fact that we're all aware of how important it is to develop children's oracy skills, but this links directly back as well to that confidence around having your own voice, doesn't it? And having confidence in your own questions and raising questions about themselves, around that kind of cultural and social understanding, where they fit into society and that kind of thing. So I think it all links together, and that practicing questioning and giving them the confidence, as I said, in their own questions is really paramount as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, oracy, I'd love us to do this again at another point and just even talk about oracy, because how have we got to the point where oracy has to be a thing in school? It should just be an integral part of children's learning. But we'll come to that another time.
We mustn't see oracy as something separate. I think that's really important. And that's the tendency, isn't it? Is to see things sort of compartmentalized, if you like, as opposed to part of that big holistic picture, which is all to do with literacy, being literate and being confident. Around your own thoughts and ideas around writing or reading or speaking.
And I think that when you think about digital communication, there's such a merger of short form type text type that kind of merges with oracy, that can be, again, the nuance of that communication can be so difficult for children to process or misread or read something into that's not there, or especially when then there's an emoji attached to it that can, so there's such a, it's as you say, it's even more reason for us to not separate it. But I guess sorry.
As adults as well, the more we use, ChatGPT and AI and all of those things, I think the fear for me is that it's kind of taking away from your kind of the neural processes around thought and actually thinking about what you're actually writing. Because it's so, there are so many benefits, aren't there? But I suppose, translating that to kind of school and children I suppose it's that balance again, isn't it? Of leveraging technology, but actually not taking the actual thought and understanding away from children. That's kind of like,
and still putting value on human thought processes, and that they are kind of separate entities. Let's keep them separate for as long as possible. But I guess that also goes back to maybe a need in our education system to value more of the process and less of the outcome. Because for as long as we're playing guess what's in my head with our children at school, we're not, in giving enough credibility to children's own opinions and thoughts, and
that's got to be that nurturing, nourishing those things, and bringing their voices, out, if you like, and really giving, amplifying their voices or providing them with a platform for their own voices around text, when they write or when they just speak about their opinions around things, are absolutely the most important thing, aren't they? I would say now, today, that's really important. And the digital aspect is a tool which can be used, effectively, but as you say, definitely the human functions of literacy need to be nourished and maintained.
And what a great this is a very great point to stop. Probably, I think we could keep going all morning, but
I've got so much more to say.
I know, same. But I think ultimately, I mean, it sounds to me like what we're kind of angling for is cultivating a bit of a biliterate brain, you know, capable of deep thought in both digital
absolutely
and
I'm a big advocate of that. I think,
yes,
you know, what my major concern, I suppose, you know, is that we go too far
yes,
the digital way, and that we lose, you know, where there's such an opportunity to kind of really enhance both aspects, that biliterate brain, if you like. Yeah.
Well, Nicola, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for everything that you are doing to encourage children to fall in love with reading, writing, and, you know,
it never feels like enough, does it, Caroline? There's a massive job. There is a really
massive job. But I'm sure that you are doing an incredible job with what you've set out to do. So, and thank you for making time to talk to us as well. And I hope that we've got, you know, other opportunities to chat about this, because yeah, it's something that I'm very passionate about. And absolutely,
and it's a really important day as well.
It is a really important day. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, hope to speak to you soon.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
You too. Thanks, Nicola. Bye.